I'm Jillian Sterling. And in the logistics world, I'm the one who ensures a $50 million shipment doesn't vanish into the Atlantic. I spent a decade managing chaos and living on black coffee to finally afford my $1,450,000 sanctuary overlooking the Chicago skyline. Tonight was supposed to be the victory lap, a quiet anniversary dinner with my husband, Reed, celebrating the keys finally in our hands. My phone buzzed with a high-priority alert from my Nest system. A persistent vibration that cut through the soft jazz of the restaurant. I slid the screen open under the table, expecting a stray cat or a delivery. But the audio that hissed through my earbuds made my heart turn to stone. My younger sister Skylar's voice echoed through the house speakers, sharp and mocking, as she shouted to a crowd. "Don't worry about the noise. My boring sister is halfway to London for a business trip. So this penthouse is officially our playground tonight." Reed leaned in, his brow furrowing as he caught the ghost of the music leaking from my phone, and whispered, "Jill, what's going on? Is that the apartment?" I adjusted the volume, my thumb trembling as I swiped to the living room feed to see 50 strangers trampling my custom white oak floors. Skylar stood on my marble kitchen island, clutching a bottle of my vintage Cristal, and screamed, "First drink is free. But if you want the premium bar in the study, it's $50 at the door via Venmo." Reed stared at the screen, his voice dropping to a dangerous, structural engineer calm as he muttered, "She didn't just break in. She's running a commercial nightclub in our home." I looked him in the eye, my logistics brain already, calculating the legal weight of the scene, and replied, "Reed, she thinks she's the queen of a party, but she just walked into a trap I haven't even sprung yet." He reached for his coat, his jaw set as he said, "We need to get there now and throw them out before they burn it down." I placed my hand firmly on his arm, staring at the live feed of a 17-year-old chugging vodka, and countered, "No. If we go now, my parents will call it a family spat. We stay here for 10 more minutes until the liquor is finished and the felony is undeniable." 21st N. I watched the screen as a group of teenagers used my $12,000 velvet sofa as a trampoline. Their muddy sneakers ground into the fabric I had waited 6 months for. Reed's knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the restaurant table and hissed, "Jill, they are destroying the place. We have to call the police right this second." I zoomed in on the kitchen counter, identifying at least 5 minors holding red cups, and whispered, "Patience. Reed." Because a simple trespass call gets Skylar a slap on the wrist, but providing alcohol to minors gets her a criminal record. He shook his head in disbelief, checking his watch while muttering, "The liability alone is $1 million if one of those kids trips over the balcony or drives home drunk." I tapped the record button on the app, capturing Skylar handing a shot glass to a girl who couldn't have been older than 16, and replied, "That is exactly why I am letting the evidence pile up, because I want her to face the full weight of the Illinois compiled statutes." Skylar appeared on the feed again, laughing as she kicked a hole in the drywall near the foyer and yelled to the room, "Who cares about the deposit? My sister is a corporate drone. She can just work another weekend to fix it." Reed looked at me, his eyes dark with fury as he asked, "How can she be this delusional after everything you have done for her?" I felt a cold, surgical detachment settle over me and answered, "Because our parents taught her that my success is public property. But tonight, she learns that my property is a crime scene." He hid, leaning back as he saw the flashing red alert on my phone, and said, "The neighbors are already calling it in. The noise complaints are hitting the precinct." I checked the local dispatch log on my second screen and whispered, "Perfect. The police are 3 blocks away. So now we make the official call to ensure they know the owner is watching every second of this disaster." I dialed 911. My voice steady as I spoke to the operator. This is Jillian Sterling. I am the owner of the property at 400 North Lakeshore Drive, and I am currently witnessing an unauthorized mass gathering and felony distribution of alcohol to minors via my live security feed. The operator asked if I was on site, and I responded, I am at a safe distance, but I have a high-definition recording of the suspects, including the primary organizer, Skylar Sterling. Reed grabbed his keys and stood up, looking at me with a grim nod as he said, The check is paid. Let's get to the precinct to hand over the digital files before my parents try to talk the officers out of it. I stood up beside him, my face a mask of iron resolve, and replied, They can't talk their way out of a cloud-synced server. Reed, because by the time we arrive, Skylar won't be a sister. She will be a defendant. We walked out of the restaurant into the biting Chicago wind. The mission clear and the mercy gone. The blue and red lights fractured against the glass of my penthouse windows as 3 patrol cars screeched to a halt outside the lobby. I sat in the parked car with Reed, my iPad glowing with the live feed as the music inside abruptly died, replaced by the panicked shouts of teenagers scurrying like rats. I tapped the microphone icon on my security app, my voice booming through the living room speakers with a cold, metallic authority that froze everyone in their tracks. Skylar, don't even think about the back exit, because I've already locked the freight elevator from my phone and the police are at your front door. She spun around, eyes wide and bloodshot, screaming at the ceiling. Jill, you bitch. You're spying on me? You're going to get everyone in trouble over a little noise. I watched a tall officer kick the door open and replied through the speaker. It's not the noise. Skylar. It's the $4,000 worth of stolen liquor and the 6 minors currently hiding in my walk-in closet. The lead officer, Sergeant Miller, stepped into the frame and shouted, Chicago PD, everyone against the wall. ID's out. Now, Skylar tried to stumble toward him, waving her hands and stammering. Officer, wait. This is my house. My sister said I could stay here while she's in London. I watched the sergeant look directly into the camera lens and said, Sergeant Miller, this is the owner Jillian Sterling speaking through the system. I have never given her permission to enter. And I am currently uploading the footage of her charging a $50 entry fee to my secure server. The sergeant nodded at the camera and told Skylar, Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Because the owner is pressing charges for criminal trespass and contributing to the delinquency of minors. Skylar began to shriek. You can't do this. Jill, we're family. You're going to ruin my life over a party. I stared at her distorted face on the screen and whispered into the mic. You ruined your life the moment you treated my hard work like a cheap motel. Skylar, Sergeant, I want a full inventory of the damage for the felony report. Reed watched as they hauled her out in handcuffs, her screams echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors hissed shut. She actually thought she could lie her way out of a recorded video. Reed muttered, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he looked at the sheer chaos left behind. I closed the app, the silence in the car feeling heavier than the noise of the party, and replied, She's lived in a world without consequences for 20 years. But the Illinois legal system doesn't care about our mother's excuses. He looked at me, a mix of pride and concern in his eyes, and asked, Are you ready for the phone call that's coming? You know your parents are already on their way to the precinct. I leaned my head back against the seat, watching the last patrol car pull away, and answered, I've been managing logistics for a decade. Reed, dealing with 2 enablers and a felon is just another project on my desk. We walked into the precinct 10 minutes later, the air thick with the smell of cheap coffee and industrial cleaner. My mother rushed toward me the second I cleared the metal detector, Her face twisted in a mask of weeping outrage as she yelled, "Jillian, how could you be so cruel to your own flesh and blood? Calling the police like she's a common criminal?" I didn't stop walking, my heels clicking sharply on the linoleum as I replied, "She is a criminal, Mom, and if you don't step aside, I'll add a harassment charge to your night as well." My father stood by the desk, his face purple with rage, shouting, "I'll pay for the damn sofa. Just tell the sergeant you made a mistake and let your sister come home." I looked him dead in the eye, pulled out a printed stack of the $1,450,000 closing documents, and told him, "You can't afford the damages or the legal fees she's about to rack up. So stay out of my way before you lose your retirement too." The sergeant motioned me toward the interview room, and I walked past my stunned parents without a single glance back. The bridge between us finally turned to ash. The fluorescent lights of the precinct waiting room hummed like a warning as my mother cornered me, her voice trembling with a rehearsed fragility. "Jillian, you have always been the successful one, the rock of this family. So why are you choosing to be our executioner tonight?" I sat on the hard plastic bench, refusing to meet her gaze, and replied, "I am not the executioner. Mom, I am the homeowner who was robbed by her own sister while I was out at dinner." My father paced the small space, his heavy footsteps echoing as he barked, "It was a party, not a haste. And you're acting like she burned the city down just to satisfy your ego." I looked up at him, my expression a blank wall of professional indifference, and said, "She distributed alcohol to 17-year-olds in my name. So if one of them had died, it wouldn't be my ego on the line. It would be my life." My mother grabbed my wrist, her grip desperate and intrusive as she pleaded, "Families are supposed to help each other, to hide each other's flaws, not hand them over to a sergeant on a silver platter." I pulled my arm away with a sharp, controlled motion and countered, "What you call helping is actually enabling her to be a parasite. And I am officially done funding her host body." Reed stepped between us, his presence a silent barrier, and told them, "Jillian has worked 60 hours a week for a decade to build her life, while Skylar hasn't worked 60 minutes in her entire existence." My father sneered at Reed, pointing a shaking finger at his chest while shouting, "You stay out of this. You're just the husband. You don't understand the bond of sterling blood." Reed didn't flinch, his voice dropping to a low, icy register as he responded, "I understand that sterling blood seems to be a license for theft and property damage in this family, and I won't let my wife bleed out for it. If Skylar goes to jail, I will never speak to you again. Do you hear me? Jillian?" my mother screamed, her face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. I stood up, smoothing my coat with meticulous care, and looked her in the eye to deliver the final blow. "That sounds less like a threat and more like a long overdue promotion to a peaceful life. So please, start the silence tonight." My father realized his intimidation wasn't working and switched to a pathetic, gravelly whine, asking, "Is a $1,450,000 apartment really worth more to you than your only sister's future?" I gripped my iPad containing the evidence and told him, "The apartment is just wood and stone, but my self-respect is priceless. And Skylar already sold hers for a $50 cover charge at the door." I turned my back on them and walked toward the sergeant's office, the sound of my mother's hysterical sobbing fading into the background of a world I no longer inhabited. The logistics of revenge require the same precision as a global supply chain, and I spent the next 48 hours mapping Skylar's total collapse, while Reed and I surveyed the $45,000 in damages to our penthouse. I discovered a thick envelope hidden in my sister's old room at my parents' house, containing credit card statements in my father's name. I showed the $12,000 in fraudulent charges to Reed and muttered, She wasn't just partying on my floor. She's been draining my father's retirement account to fund her fake influencer lifestyle. Reed shook his head, looking over the forged signatures on the loan applications, and asked, "Are you going to tell him? Or are you going to let the banks do it?" I leaned back against the scarred kitchen island and replied, "I'm handing these to the detective today because identity theft against a senior is an automatic felony enhancement in Illinois. By Wednesday, my lawyer, Marcus, met us at the office with a grim stack of civil filings that made the criminal charges look like a warm-up. Jillian, I've been contacted by the parents of a 16-year-old who ended up in the ER with alcohol poisoning after Skylar's party," Marcus said, sliding a document across the desk. I looked at the $250,000 demand for medical damages and whispered, "They aren't suing me as the homeowner." "Are they?" Marcus tapped a specific clause and replied, "No, because I provided them with your security footage showing you were at dinner. They are suing Skylar and your parents as her legal guardians and enablers." Reed looked at the figure and added, "My parents' house in the suburbs is barely worth $300,000. So this lawsuit will literally leave them homeless." Skylar's court-appointed attorney called me an hour later, sounding exhausted as he tried to negotiate a settlement I had no intention of granting. "Ms. Sterling, my client is willing to plead guilty to the trespass if you drop the theft and property damage claims," he pleaded over the speakerphone. I adjusted the high-resolution photo of my ruined $12,000 sofa on my monitor and answered, "I don't negotiate with people who treat my home like a frat house. So tell Skylar to prepare for the civil depositions," he said, his tone turning desperate as he said, "Your parents are already facing foreclosure because of the legal fees. Do you really want to see your family on the street?" I stared out the window at the skyline I had worked so hard to see and replied, "They chose to bankroll a criminal. And now the bill is due in full." I spent the afternoon forwarding the time-stamped video of Skylar charging entry fees to the IRS tip line and the Venmo fraud department. Reed walked into the study with 2 cups of coffee and asked, "Is there anything left of her digital life that you haven't dismantled yet?" I hit send on a file containing Skylar's fake lease agreement and told him, "She wanted to be a public figure. So I'm making sure every financial institution in the country knows her name." He sat down, looking at the systematic destruction of Skylar's future, and whispered, "It's a masterclass in fallout." "Jill," I took a sip of my coffee, feeling the cold weight of the past decade finally lifting, and replied, "Logistics is about moving things from point A to point B. And right now, Skylar is headed straight to point 0. 6 months later, the Cook County Courthouse felt like a tomb for my family's old life. Skylar stood before the judge, her influencer bravado replaced by a cheap suit and a look of hollow terror as the clerk read the $45,000 restitution order. My mother clutched her handbag and hissed at me from across the aisle. "Are you happy now that your sister is a felon and we've had to list the house for $285,000 just to stay out of bankruptcy?" I didn't flinch, looking at her through my designer glasses while I replied, "I'm not happy, Mom. I'm just finally debt-free from the emotional taxes this family has been charging me for 30 years. The judge hammered the gavel, sentencing Skylar to 2 years of felony probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory enrollment in a victim impact program. Skylar turned to me, her voice a thin, pathetic rasp as she pleaded, "Jill, please, tell the parents of that kid to drop the $250,000 civil suit. I'll work for you for free for the rest of my life." I stood up, smoothing my blazer, and looked down at her to say, "The logistics of your life are no longer my department, Skylar. So you'll have to find someone else to manage your wreckage." My father tried to block my exit, his voice cracking as he whispered, "I have to go back to work at 68 because of you. Do you have any soul left at all?" I brushed a piece of lint off my shoulder and answered, I have enough soul to know that accountability isn't cruelty. And I hope you enjoy your new shift at the hardware store. Reed met me in the hallway, his face a calm sanctuary after the toxic heat of the courtroom. The lawyer confirmed the $45,000 restitution is being garnished from Skylar's future wages and any assets our parents have left, Reed said, guiding me toward the elevators. I watched my mother collapse into a chair, sobbing about the good old days, and told him the good old days were just a long series of me paying for their mistakes. But that account is officially closed. Reed hit the down button and asked, what about the final $15,000 in repair bills for the penthouse floors? I looked at the elevator's digital floor indicator and replied, the court order covers it. And if they don't pay, I'll put a lien on the only thing they have left, their dignity. As we walked out into the crisp Chicago air, Skylar's lawyer ran after us, shouting that we were destroying a young woman's potential. I stopped at the curb, looked the man in the eye, and told him her potential was spent the moment she charged $50 to let minors get alcohol poisoning in my living room. He stood speechless as I stepped into our waiting car, the door closing with a solid, expensive thud that muffled the world. Reed looked at me, a soft smile playing on his lips, and said, it's finally over, Jillian. The fortress is secure. I leaned my head against the cool leather seat and whispered, it's not just secure, Reed. It's finally ours. The penthouse is finally silent, the smell of industrial cleaner replaced by the faint scent of fresh jasmine. I sat on my restored $12,000 sofa, watching the Chicago sunset bleed gold across the skyline I worked 10 years to earn. Reed handed me a glass of wine and whispered, no alerts on the phone tonight, Jill. Just us. I looked at the dark screen of my tablet, knowing my old family was miles away in a cramped apartment, and replied, peace isn't just the absence of noise, Reed. It's the presence of boundaries. I have realized that being the responsible one doesn't mean carrying everyone else's luggage until your own spirit breaks. True family isn't defined by the blood you share, but by the respect you trade and the sanctuary you build together. Thank you for following my journey of reclaiming my life and my home. Choosing yourself over toxic family is a battle, but the peace on the other side is worth every legal fee. Do you think I was too cold? Or was this the only way to stop the cycle? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Hit that like button if you believe in accountability. And subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.